This week, the end of a war and the promise of freedom. First, let's end that war. The friendly camp of the Dakota have set up an actual camp, and on the 26th, Colonel Henry Sibley arrives to receive their surrender. Colonel Sibley gets 269 prisoners who were held by the Sioux, and receives more Sioux who he disarms. The Indians and half-breeds assembled in considerable numbers, and I proceed to give them very briefly my views of the late proceedings, my determination that the guilty party should be pursued and overtaken, if possible, and may demand that all captives should be delivered to me instantly, that I might take them to my camp. At Camp Release, he has nearly 2,000 Sioux, among them warriors, children, wives, and widows, taken captive. On the 27th, he creates a military tribunal to investigate the Sioux for their crimes. On the 28th, they begin their interrogations. Sibley does not have the authority to form this tribunal. The Dakota War has claimed hundreds of lives and ended with a Union victory. Of those killed, it was mostly civilians. The state of Minnesota is no longer consumed by fear. The question now is, where is Little Crow? On the 30th, we head over to the state of Missouri for what is now becoming a trend of guerrilla battles. In the very southwest of the state is the small town of Newtonia, an inconsequential farming community. 6,000 Confederates occupy it, who are led by Colonels Douglas Cooper and Joseph Shelby, who each command a brigade. Cooper's brigade is made up of Cherokee, Chickasaw, and Choctaw infantry and cavalry. Shelby's brigade, called by some an Iron Brigade, I refuse to call it that, is made up of Missouri and Texan cavalry. Union numbers 4,500 men, and is led by Brigadier General Frederick Salomon, which contains a mixture of artillery, cavalry, and infantry. The battle begins as Salomon's men engage from the north. Make progress, but after a flanking counterattack are forced from the field. The Union suffered 245 casualties to the Confederate 78. Newtonia is later partially encircled by the Union on the 2nd of October. Before we get to the talk of the town, the Emancipation Proclamation, I must cover events in the West. After the defeat at Iuka, Confederate forces under Major General Sterling Price and Earl Van Dorn moved southwest to Boonville, then further west past the Union forces. They moved north and on the 2nd arrived at Chewalla, west of Corinth, getting to the other side of Major General Ulysses S. Grant's army. Major General William Rosecrans, with his Army of the Mississippi, is holding the city of Corinth and receives word from Grant, but he's not convinced the enemy are at Chewalla. He has 23,000 men, and the Confederates maybe 28,000 at most. It would be foolish to attack his well-fortified position when they barely outnumber him. Then there's the matter of Kentucky. Major General Don Carlos Buell has the Army of the Ohio and around 55,000 men. He also has a second in command, Major General George Henry Thomas. On the 29th of September, General Thomas was offered the command of the army, but turned it down. On the 1st, the Army of the Ohio leaves Louisville, Kentucky, to engage with the Confederates' Army of Mississippi under full General Braxton E. Bragg. Bragg's army is quite different. He controls an army less than 20,000 in number. But that isn't his entire force. Major General Edmund Kirby Smith controls the Army of Kentucky, around 21,000. If they combine, they have a good shot against Buell's numerous but inexperienced command. Now, let's speak of the Emancipation Proclamation, the freeing of all slaves in the rebellious states on January 1st, 1863, with some exemptions of places where the Union has already occupied. Some are very cynical in their view. We show our sympathy with slavery by emancipating slaves where we cannot reach them and holding them in bondage where we can set them free. Despite what the harsh words of the Secretary of State would lead you to believe, certain slaves will for sure be freed on January 1st unless the Union is pushed back. Thousands of slaves already, upon hearing of the order, have escaped from their plantations and been arriving into the Union Army camps en masse. The real question now is the political impact. The order is praised by radical Republicans, of course, and denounced by copper Democrats, of course. Then, 2 days after the proclamation, Lincoln suspended habeas corpus. War Democrats are split on the order as a whole. It goes against party policy, but it is for the war effort which they do support. The split is striking and very worrying for both sides. The Republicans don't have any defections worth mentioning within their faction, from the center or even the conservative wing under Blair. Then there is the public reaction. Praised in Europe, from England to Italy, condemned by the Confederacy. But what matters the most to Lincoln is the voters, the Union. The order is received better than expected, but it does cost Lincoln support. And Copperheads start capturing the anger. Democratic voters start leaving the war faction and head to Clement Vallandigham. Then there is Sickles. He begins reorganizing his men, drilling, digging, training, planning. His camp is hard at work. And I don't know his viewpoint on the Emancipation Proclamation. That's where the week ends, and it ends in the West, for the war is no longer on a knife's edge between the Army of the Potomac and the Army of Northern Virginia. It's not McClellan or Lee, it's Buell or Bragg. The political aftermath of Lincoln's actions will remain to be seen, but for once, the Union can breathe. For this week, I would like to thank the amazing Field Marshal with his own YouTube channel, which is in the description and will be in the comment below, for being my Sioux War correspondent. He does amazing videos on the War of Spanish Succession. You should really check him out. I would also like to thank my two amazing patrons, Kevin Mack and John Fox, for their continued support. We'll continue to bring whatever this is to you every week. You should be seeing now on the screen recommendations for other videos, a playlist, and to subscribe. I hope that you will do all three and at least two. Thank you, and I will see you next week.